speaker lined up for you. But first, we're going to kick things off here with some fun music from the Eco Echoes, and I'd like you to know who they are. Hold your applause. See, we have John Stiles at lead guitar. He's a songwriter and singer and self-proclaimed tree hugger. John lives in Brooklyn Center and is pastor at Our Redeemer Lutheran Church in Pine City. Jake Deerhog at the piano plays everything from boogie woogie to classical. He has mixed music with ministry for over 25 years and is a pastor at Living Waters Lutheran Church in Sauk Rapids. Willis Matson has been playing with bands since he was a child. He has toured and recorded music for many years with bands like The Avengers at Bemidji State, the folk band Homegrown Tomatoes, and Celtic music with North Wind Crossing, which was here at the Holmes Theater with McNaughton Irish Dancers. He lives in Shell Lake Township. Tom Neuenfeld, Jim McCormick, and Padan Pinkham are with the band with vocals. Whenever they can, they join in. All right, Jay, bring up those lyrics for us. We're invited to sing along.
All right, for the chorus, we need your help. So when we get to the part, what in the world is going on, we need you to say that part along with us. So we're going to practice that. Ready? Oh, Lord, something's wrong.
What in the world is going on?
That's right. Just like that, when we get that part of the sermon, the song, and then
Preach it.
And then there's one other part at the end where we kind of go back and forth. And then, so we say, what's going on?
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 What's going on? And you follow these guys and they'll get you there safely. All right. Sit in the shade, but Mercury's rising. Couldn't leave the catch I made. The world is crying. Trees have blasted from the sky. The earth is tired. Trees and fields all caught on fire. Oh Lord, something's wrong. What in the world is going on? Paper or plastic, they bag it for me. It comes with a handle, but it's filling all the seas. The world is crying. It's crying. Trees and grass from the sky. The earth is tired. Trees and fields all cut on fire. Oh Lord, something's wrong. What in the world is going on? Power in the wind and power in the sun. We pour it through pipelines, and my fishing days might be done. The world is crying. It's crying. Tears like acid from the sky, from the sky. The earth is tired. Trees and fields all caught on fire. Oh Lord, something's wrong. What in the world is going on? Here we go now. What's going
First Lutheran Church for their creation care team and for opening their beautiful facility and their fantastic and talented staff. Thank you to our sponsors, Detroit Lakes Public Utilities, Wild Rice Electric, Lakes Region Electric, and Otter Tail Power, the Isaac Walton League Prairie Woods chapter of DL, and West Central Climate Action. And thank you to Oak Grove Presbyterian Church of Bloomington for their leadership in planning our event. And finally, thank you to the University of Minnesota's Clean Energy Resource Team for managing our ride and drives. The survey in your pews is important to us. Please complete it before you go and place it on the table in the back. Thank you. We really need your comments for planning another event like this. Where do I start when introducing Paul Douglas? He's a nationally known expert meteorologist. You may know him from Almanac, the statewide weekly news program, or reading his daily weather column in the Star Tribune. Or you may have read one of his popular books, such as Caring for Creation. But what you will learn today is that Paul is a trailblazer. He invented backyard outdoor weather format for TV, and that's now used nationwide. In the 80s, he started a software venture called Earthwatch Communications, and this was the start of three-dimensional weather graphics technology. And it's fair to say that we use his technology every day because it was his company, Digital Cyclone, that led to our cell phones having location weather alerts and hourly weather reports. And there's more to that I will let him share. I first met Paul after hearing him speak on climate about 5 years ago. And then we became friends because he helped on the video series, What Fuels You, USA, created by our own hometown, Erica Gilsdorf. And at the beginning, we were trying to figure out, how are we going to make this work? And I'd say, well, I know a guy. I could call Paul Douglas and see what he thinks. And by golly, he answered the phone. And then he helped so much as a friend and colleague. The video segments with Paul are just really great. I've always been a very spiritual person and philosophical. And when I heard him present, I thought, wow, he's actually applying a sense of the spiritual to climate. And for the first time, someone explained it to me in a way that was meaningful, in a way that gave me ideas and motivation to promote renewables at the local level. Because I didn't want to see this clean energy revolution pass us by. The event today is all about the opportunity in the technology. He is going to share how he came to think of climate change from a faith perspective. He has been trailblazing on that too by finding ways to talk about climate risk so that it resonates with all of us. So whether you're here because you're curious, or you're here because this is your church home, or because you're thinking of going electric, there's something in the message here that will apply to you. I invite you to welcome with me Paul Douglas.
Thank you, Paulie. Thank you. Thank you. Wow, what a great introduction. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Hurricane Polly. You're a Category 5, by the way. And we're lucky to have you. And thanks to your team. Thank you to First Lutheran, again, for opening up their doors. And I just want to mention, I was raised Lutheran, okay? And Presbyterian, and Baptist. My parents were always shopping for a better deal, I think. And I married a Catholic girl, so go figure. But it's great to be here. And I discovered that there's no direct way to get from Pelican Lake to Detroit Lake. But that was actually not a negative, it was a positive. I had the most amazing drive out here with the ripening leaves and solitude. It seemed like I was the only person on the highway. And it reminded me of what a special place we live in. We live in a resort, and it demands our care and our compassion. And thank you, all of you, for taking time out of your busy weekend to stop by and hear what the weather guy has to say. I'm a Christian, and I've been proclaiming that for a long time. I love the Lord, and the Lord loves me in spite of my many imperfections. And that's a gift that's available to all of us. And so, in my Christian walk and my meteorological walk, I kind of came to a fork in the road, because by the late 90s, I was scratching my head, wondering, maybe those climate scientists are right. I was seeing things almost every day that made me scratch my head. So this was not an overnight epiphany where I wake up one day and I go, oh yeah, the climate is changing. It was a gradual drip, drip over the span of decades. You have natural weather variations. We've always had that. Since Adam and Eve, we've had crazy weather swings. But superimposed on that, something else was going on. And by the late 90s, I was speaking up and speaking out and sharing my observations and trying to connect the dots. This is from our place on Pelican Lake, an old 1950s cabin, kind of a hodgepodge. They kept adding on to it, and we love it. We call it our little slice of heaven, and I want to remind all of you that the world isn't ending, not yet, but it is warming, and that has consequences. It's a threat, and it's an opportunity. I think most experts would agree that the downside of a warming world more than make up for the upside. We're still going to have winter. It's still going to snow, although we may see a little more ice here in the Detroit Lakes area as we continue through this century. We're already seeing that in southern Minnesota. 4 times more ice events in January than we had prior to 2000. A little bit about me and my family. This is my oldest son, Walt, who plays the guitar and now works for Salesforce. That is his wife, Tracy. They got married 2015 up at Grandview Lodge on Gull Lake, so they love the up north woods as much as we do. My youngest son, Brett, went to the Naval Academy, flew choppers for the Navy in the South China Sea and the Persian Gulf off the coast of Iran. Worked at the Pentagon for a time, was stationed in Bahrain, and he just got out of the Navy in April, and now he's living in Virginia, working for a defense subcontractor. And that's Brett right there, flying the big Sikorsky's, the MH-60 Romeo variation. And he goes, Dad, I love to fly, but flying off the coast of Iran, he said it was 120 degrees in the cockpit, and they don't air condition those suckers. He said it takes some of the joy out of flying. And he said, oh yeah, the Iranians had their surface-to-air missiles locked onto my helicopter. I could see it. Thankfully, they didn't push the button and fire. But he goes, it's not for the faint of heart. But I'm proud of my family. This is my patient wife of 38 years, Lori, who I met at Penn State. I went to get a meteorology degree at Penn State. I was a linebacker. She was a cheerleader. We had a few losing seasons. 4 to be exact. No, I was not a linebacker. And this is my grandson, Jordan, who's 2.5 and addicted to adrenaline. He loves to go fast. So when we get out on the lake, he loves to be in charge, and he pushes that throttle more than he should. As I mentioned, I'm a Christian. All my life, I've leaned conservative. I was raised in a very conservative household. I'm an old Eagle Scout. Weather Merit Badge was a favorite. That's back when I had hair. I think I was 15. I don't know. But anyway, Weather Merit Badge and a couple of great teachers got me going on the weather track. That and a tropical storm named Agnes, which flooded our home. I grew up west of Philadelphia in Lancaster County, the Amish country, and this tropical storm just sat right over Pennsylvania for the better part of a day, 2 days, and flooded out the lower level of our home. And nobody predicted that it would just sit there, for the better part of 36 hours. And so that got me going. We're also a military family, and many days I feel like an albino unicorn talking about climate change. Well, isn't that a liberal issue? No, it's data. It's reality. And I don't think acknowledging reality is a liberal thing or a conservative thing. It's a common sense thing. And Minnesotans have common sense. And I invite people, even if you're skeptical, it's good to be skeptical. The biggest skeptics on the planet are scientists. Science is organized skepticism. Keep an open mind. And I have more respect for people who change their minds based on a preponderance of evidence than people who dig in their heels and say, no, this is threatening, I can't change my mind. Sure, don't do it for any politician. Do it for your kids, do it for your grandkids and their grandkids. Polly mentioned my broadcast career. That was the original backyard. They aimed a camera out a garage window in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, Pennsylvania. My first gig was $50 a weekend. They paid, I was a senior at Penn State, and on the weekends I'd drive up. $50 a weekend, and Paul will put you up at the luxury budget hotel. I said, oh, you had me at luxury budget. But that was my foot in the door. And I was happy with radio. I had a little business at Penn State. In my dorm room, I would do weather for 11 radio stations every morning, and I would update that in the afternoon. And it was, it was a couple of $100 here and there, but it helped to pay my way through college, and I loved having the independence of having a business on the side. And I've had something on the side, a business of some sort, ever since, because I never trusted television and radio. It's a fickle business, right? It's a little like how I imagine being in the NFL. You can have a couple of good years, and then, somebody new comes in and wants to clean house. And I was also intellectually curious about starting a business. How do you do that? How do you make it profitable? How do you treat people? How do you create a team, surround yourself with smart people so you have a prayer of success? But yeah, that was the original backyard. And they explained this to me, and I said, you realize I'm going to get wet standing out there? And they're like, yeah. I'm going to get cold, I'm going to be shivering, and snow falling on my head. And yeah, people. And the news director even said, viewers like to see the meteorologists suffer. So I'm basically a weather martyr standing out there. And I brought it to Care 11 in the Twin Cities, and I said it in jest. One day in 1983, when I first got there, and we were getting smoked by Channel 5 and Channel 4. We were getting beaten by Leave It to Beaver reruns at 10 o'clock. We had nothing to lose. So one day I'm sitting at a conference room meeting, and I'm going, yeah, I did backyard weather in Pennsylvania. And they looked at me and said, oh, tell us more. And the more I talked, I was digging the hole deeper. They were like, yeah, we should try that. We got nothing to lose. So let's try backyard weather. And in the course of my adventures at Channel 11, I was bored with the graphics. And Polly mentioned we created three-dimensional weather graphics that debuted on Channel 11, and then a few hundred TV stations around the world said, yeah, we're looking for a new way to show the weather. And somehow Steven Spielberg found out about what we were doing. I get a call from one of his people who said, Paul, we're making a movie about dinosaurs. It's called Jurassic Park. And Steve loves your visuals and would love to use your weather graphics in the control room scenes of Jurassic Park. And so, like, wow, okay, that sounds like fun. So we flew out to Universal Studios and we participated in the filming of Jurassic Park. He wanted very specific flybys, and this was Jurassic Park right here. And so we draped imagery from Hurricane Andrew that hit Miami back in '92, and we put that over this three-dimensional Jurassic Park. And so anyway, not to belabor that, but I still get residual checks. This is God tapping you on the shoulder saying, you're really not a big deal. Because I had a scene after Jurassic Park. We participated in Twister. How many of you have seen the movie Twister? Oh yeah. Well, we filmed these scenes in Ames, Iowa. They moved the production from Oklahoma to Iowa because Oklahoma was in a drought. There were no tornadoes, there were no clouds. It was sunny every day, and so they moved everybody up to Iowa, and they took a barn and converted this barn into a high-tech weather center. And they pumped in air conditioning, but every time, and it was 100 degrees, by the way, and every time they filmed, they had to turn off the AC. And everybody was sweating. All the stars were sweating, and they had makeup artists coming up and putting powder on your face so you wouldn't be shiny. And I walk in expecting to do special effects to help with the visuals. And they go, hey, Paul, you want to be in the movie? And I'm thinking big romantic scene with Helen Hunt. They were not thinking that. They go, Paul, here's your line. You're looking at the Doppler and you say, hey, Bryce, you better come here and take a look at this. And as God is my witness, I did it 8 or 9 times before the director finally threw up his hands and said, all right, it's good enough. But I still get these stupid residual checks, which is, and I have this one framed just to remind me. But my late mother used to admonish me and say, don't take the easy path. Do stuff that scares you every day. And talking on the radio for 3 hours every afternoon on CCO radio with Jordana Green scared me. I mean, most days I felt like I was over my skis talking about very contentious issues, gun rights, abortion, politics. By the way, Jordana is recovering from leukemia, and she's doing better. She had a bone marrow transplant. It worked. She's generating healthy red blood cells now. She's not totally out of the woods. They test her for cancer, blood cancer, twice a month, but she's doing much, much better. And then, as somebody who leans conservative, talking about climate change, albino unicorn, some of the channels like CNN and MSNBC had me on to connect the dots. Okay, why are the hurricanes more intense? Well, the water's warmer. And the warmer the water, the more these hurricanes can intensify. They get their power from warm ocean water. And we saw it with Ian that just devastated Southwest Florida. It went from a Category 1 to almost a Category 5 in less than 48 hours. It's called rapid intensification. We're not seeing more hurricanes, but the hurricanes that do form naturally, often, increasingly, are more extreme, more intense. We rent a place in the Florida Panhandle every February. I wouldn't dream of owning something near the water in Florida. Not even I want to watch the Weather Channel that much. So my advice, take it or leave it, is Florida sounds pretty good, at least part of the year. Rent. Rent. One of my businesses now is Climate Trends. And by the way, I've started 7 companies since I was in college. And I have actually 2 left. A company called Predictix, which does weather briefings, and we have Climate Trends. We work with companies and climate scientists and the latest climate models, and we try to look over the horizon 20, 30, 50 years. Utilities have come to us. Fossil fuel interests have come to us. One company that was involved in salt mining, scared to death. If the winters are warming, our city's going to need less salt. And we actually found out quite the opposite, because we're going to be getting more mixed icy storms, a mix of snow, ice, rain, which actually requires more salt than snow removal. And so I'm always amazed by the use cases. Companies want to reinvest wisely. They see the threat and they see an opportunity and they want some guidance. Where should we be building facilities? Where should we be reinvesting? So we create these reports for various companies, and that's something new in the last couple of years. But I've always been blessed in so many ways to be able to find great people. And I guess I'm a serial entrepreneur. I do love the challenge of starting a company. And this is actually my main gig, starting companies and having some sort of weather tech business on the side. My side hustle, as my wife just pointed out to me recently, was television and radio and print. That was my side gig, just to keep a little bit of money coming in, because how many of you have your own business? I'm just curious. Good. You know, it's a roller coaster, right? The good times are amazing. When you sell a company, it's euphoria. But when you have to get a second mortgage on your house to make payroll, to keep people paid, the pain can be incredible. And it's nice having a little steady income coming in. And that's what media has done for me over the years. Got my start again at Penn State doing weather for radio stations. Earthwatch was 3-dimensional weather graphics that we started at CARE. And then, as Polly mentioned, digital cyclone weather on cell phones. And we had to pivot, and we almost died as a company. We thought we could create a more accurate short-range forecast, and we did. But we couldn't monetize it. Nobody was willing to pay for that slight increase in accuracy. So we had all these servers, all this technology. We pivoted from more accurate forecast to how do we make it more relevant? And we were one of the first companies, if not the first, to put Doppler radar on cell phones. Actually, they were flip phones back in 2001, 2002. And at the time, that was revolutionary, and people paid $1 a month for the privilege of being able to access radar anytime, anywhere they have a cell signal. And now there are hundreds of options for just that, but our timing was pretty good. And right now we have Predictix. Eris Weather I just sold to a company in Finland in January of this year. And as a meteorologist, I can't afford to ignore data. Data that makes me uncomfortable, data that makes me squirm. If you ignore the data, you will eventually go out of business. So I'm keyed into the data every day. And some people say, well, what's a few degrees? You know, worldwide we've warmed what? Just over 2 degrees Fahrenheit. This part of Minnesota has warmed closer to 4.5 degrees since the mid-1800s. And I just point out gently that just a 5 Celsius temperature drop, 10 degrees roughly, a little more than that, triggered the last ice age. And we're just coming out of that ice age right now. And again, we've warmed 1.2 Celsius, just over 2 degrees Fahrenheit, in the last 100 years, most of that in the last 30 to 50 years. According to NOAA, concentrations of carbon dioxide, 421 parts per million. That's the highest level in 3.6 million years, when the sea level was 78 feet higher than it is today, and it was 7 degrees warmer than today. There's a lag. Not just saying it's going to be like that next week, but this increase in CO2, man-made CO2, is worrisome. Hottest years on record have been since 2015. I'm all for coincidence and serendipity, but at some point, you look at this and go, wait a second, there's a trend. Every year is a little bit warmer than the year before. These are the temperature anomalies, the departures from the averages from 1881 to 1910. And you can see this steady escalation, this escalator of warming temperatures accelerating since the turn of the century. And this is not a computer model. This is the warming that has already taken place since 1895. Far northern states seeing most of the warming, and the western U.S. as well. The heat index, the combination, I run into a lot of people, including farmers, who say it isn't just the heat, it's the humidity. We're seeing more days now with dew points in the 70s. You know, where you walk out the door and go, whoa, you feel like you're in Florida in June. And we're seeing those trends over the central U.S. Summer's not significantly hotter yet, not here, but there's more water in the air, higher humidity, so it feels hotter. And that heat index has been increasing to the tune of about 5-6 degrees across much of western Minnesota. And many farmers, and they may not want to say this in front of their friends for fear of being ostracized, but they come up to me and they say, Paul, I'm attuned to the weather. I have to be or I go out of business. And I've noticed a change in the patterns. Is this climate change? Yes. Climate, a warmer climate now, is flavoring all weather. There's natural variability, which we've had since the dawn of time, but superimposed on that, it's like turning up the volume. We're juicing the weather events that would have taken place naturally. Longer growing season. This is data from Milan, but it's this way really statewide. Those orange bars, the length of the growing season. And you can see this jump from an average. The average was about 185, 190 days between last freeze and first freeze of fall. And now in Milan in the 2010s, the most recent data, it's up closer to 213 days. So we are seeing an increase. That's an opportunity, longer growing season. It's also a threat. How do we manage pests? So what are we seeing here in the Detroit Lakes area? Longer growing season, higher humidity in the summer, warmer lake water. And I ask people, hey, do you like to fish? Do you fish for walleye? At some point, if the lakes get too warm in the summer, you're not going to be fishing for walleye. And so these changes already impacting aquatic life. We've had floods since the dawn of time, but we're juicing those floods because it's basic physics. You warm up the air, that air can hold more water vapor. There's more juice, more moisture available, so when it does rain, the rain tends to fall harder. And yes, and this year is a good example where we've always had droughts, but they seem to be accelerating faster. And fickle winters. Used to be a foregone conclusion. It's going to snow. Maybe it's going to snow a lot. But now, especially over the southern third of the state, we're seeing more icing events. I mentioned the hurricane intensities. not an increase in the number of hurricanes, but the hurricanes that do form often amplify increase in intensity right before hitting landfall, because ocean water is warming over time. The warmer the ocean, the deeper that layer of warm water, 86 degrees or higher, the more these hurricanes can blow up before landfall. People say, are you sure it's man-made emissions? Could it be something else? And the climate scientists say, well, look, the first thing they looked at was changes in solar radiation, the solar irradiance, the amount of energy striking the planet from the sun. Actually, solar irradiance has dipped ever so slightly since about 1990. Technically, we should be in a cooling phase or heading towards a cooling phase. Instead, the temperatures continue to rise. Is it volcanoes? Hundreds of millions of years ago, we had planetary volcanoes pumping methane and CO2 into the atmosphere and accelerating the warming. And a couple of 100 million years ago, it was even warmer than it is now. So yeah, we've had warm phases, but for every one of those cold phases and warm phases, there was a trigger. There was a reason why it either cooled off or warmed up. Today, the state of Florida emits more CO2, man-made CO2, than all of the world's volcanoes. It's not volcanoes. The only thing that's left, the thing that makes the most sense, is the nearly doubling of CO2 and methane in the last 150 years, most of that in the last 50 years. Climate and weather are flip sides of the same coin. You tinker with the climate, changes in the climate, it's going to flavor the weather. And what we really see is more climate volatility, which is creating more weather disruptions. And increasingly the weather, instead of sounding like, a symphony orchestra, it's like the eco echoes. You guys are good, by the way. What's going on? I get that a lot from my wife. You did what? Anyway, the weather, and this is the comment I get, it seems to be playing out of tune. What's going on? It's almost as if Mother Nature is clutching her remote control, putting the seasons on fast forward, and turning the volume of extremes up to a 10. When it rains, it often rains harder, as you're about to see. 2020, we had a record number of U.S. disasters, billion-dollar disasters, 22 that year. We're up to 15. Ian was the 15th billion-dollar disaster so far in 2022. We had one in Minnesota back in May, the derecho. And the insane amount of wind damage, mostly straight line wind damage that derecho did. Are we going to see more of these derechos? Some of the models suggest that as you increase the moisture, the dew points, that you create an environment more favorable for these massive windstorms to develop. We don't have enough data to say with a high degree of confidence, but it's something we're watching. And last year, we got another front row seat to climate change, the fires in the West. We had Hurricane Ida, which caused all kinds of problems. And last year, I think a lot of people were stunned. You think that Ida came ashore along the Gulf Coast, and yet the worst flooding was days later between Philadelphia and New York City, a 1 in 1,000-year flood. And we're seeing more of those, 1 in 500 year, 1 in 1,000 year. Every year we play Russian roulette with the weather, and you pray to God that you aren't in one of those zones where you're in a 1,000-year flood. The drought is accelerating again this year. We now have extreme drought across the Twin Cities metro, pockets of southwestern Minnesota, moderate drought into the Detroit Lakes area. And I'm worried now if we don't get significant rain before the ground freezes up in a few weeks, is that tendency towards drought going to spill over into 2023? A heavy snow year would help with lake water levels, to some degree soil moisture. But again, most of the time you get a heavy snow winter and that water runs off while the ground is still frozen. It doesn't have a chance to permeate the soil and get us back into good shape for growing season. What's happening, the hydrology cycle seems to be on fast forward. The wets are trending wetter over time, while the dries are trending drier. These are a couple of the graphics that woke me up out of my stupor. This is the percentage of the U.S. experiencing either extreme drought or extreme flood since 1910. For most of the 50s, 60s, 70s, it was right around 15% of the U.S., either extreme drought or extreme flood. Recent decades, it's been up around 30, 35, even 40%. So we're seeing more extremes. And this is extreme one-day rains. When it rains, it pours increasingly. And the data shows that. This is what's happening in the lower 48 states since 1910. There wasn't much change from 1910 to about 1980, 1990, and then ever since, we've seen that increase in these extreme one-day precipitation events. According to the Minnesota DNR, Minnesota has experienced 22 mega rains. This is where you have thousands of square miles, multiple counties, at least 6 inches of rain with a bullseye of 8 inches or more. Ever since we became a state in 1858, 22 of those. 11 of those 22 mega rains have taken place since 2000. That's either the mother of all coincidences, or a wetter atmosphere is creating more extreme floods. That appears to be what's going on. Minnesota has had 23 separate billion-dollar weather events since the turn of the century. 23. And I know the president of the Insurance Federation of Minnesota, people complaining about their premiums going up for homeowners insurance, flood insurance. Homeowners insurance premiums have tripled in the last 15 years, and that's because we're seeing more flooding, and we're all paying the price for that. So here's the deal. Every faith group, I'm a Christian, but Judaism, Islam, they all have a reverence for God's creation. There's a common theme there. It isn't unique to Christianity. The earth is the Lord's, all that is in it, the world and those who live in it, for God has founded it on the seas and established it on the rivers. Psalm 24, verse 1 and 2. In the book that I co-authored with Mitch Hescox, and thank you, those of you who've picked it up and thumbed through it, I'm grateful for that. Mitch used to be a Methodist minister, and now he heads up the Evangelical Environmental Network. People are always amazed when they see those words next to each other. Evangelical? Environmental? What? Yeah. It's catching on. Not as fast as we'd like, but it is. We talk about rights and responsibilities. I was raised, my father said, actions have consequences, and you have rights, and you have responsibilities. We love to focus on our rights and our freedoms, and thank God for those freedoms. We're less likely to spend a lot of time on our responsibilities. What responsibilities do we have? And again, call me crazy, but conservatives should probably conserve. We are caretakers of God's creation. We don't own anything. We lease everything. We are passing through, and we have a moral and spiritual obligation to hand things off to our kids and their kids so that they can enjoy the same quality of life, the same amazing Minnesota that we've enjoyed for so long. Teddy Roosevelt was a conservationist. He was a Republican, and he said conservation is a great moral issue. It involves the patriotic duty of ensuring the safety and continuance of this great nation. Of course, Teddy started the National Park Service, and the fact that we have the most amazing national parks on the planet, thanks in large part to this man. Luke 16:2. This is a translation of Luke 16:2. Man has been appointed as a steward for the management of God's property. Ultimately, he will give account for that stewardship. We are taught to be stewards of everything. Everything in our lives. It's God's. And the way I feel, I serve God when I protect His creation and defend His people. And I don't think there's anything controversial about that. We've been loaned something precious, something amazing, and we have responsibilities to keep it in good shape as much as we can. And when we see a problem, try to correct that problem. I'm a scientist, I'm a meteorologist. I do not worship the scientific method. I tell people, you can have a respect for science and a faith in something much more, but that doesn't mean that you ignore science. I liken it to a toolbox. God gave us the wherewithal to create this amazing toolbox with all these tools to improve our lives, to make our lives better, easier. I do not worship a toolbox. I worship the Creator who brought us the toolbox. God created mankind in His own image. Genesis tells us that. He gave us big, beautiful brains, the ability to think, reason, solve problems, make smart decisions, improve our lives, and have the good sense not to foul our nest. That's on us. God created the car, but right now our hands are on the steering wheel. And so we need to make smart decisions for the long term, not for the here and now, but for the long term. There are limits to science. Science has many of the answers. It doesn't have all the answers. What happens when we die? Why are we here? Why is there sin? I believe in absolutes. There's impermanence to the scientific method. You never reach solid bedrock. There's always a new observation, a new theory, a new discovery, more testing. We look at the universe through a pinhole as God gradually reveals Himself to us. And as I mentioned, we have rights and we have responsibilities. Proverbs, a good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children, but a sinner's wealth is stored up for the righteous. One more look at Luke 16:2. Yeah, we are called to be stewards in everything we do. My take, science is necessary, but it's incomplete. I acknowledge the data, and I test the science. And I also acknowledge science is important. It has helped us since the very beginning, especially in the last couple of hundred years, but I do have faith in something much more. You don't have to pick and choose. Oh, I'm a Christian, therefore I'm going to ignore the science. I think that's a bad idea. God gave us free will, the ability to make smart, inspired, long-term decisions that benefit not only us but our children, or greedy, selfish, short-term decisions. And I think putting the profits of corporate polluters ahead of the health of today's children and the welfare of future generations is immoral and unsustainable. And that's why so many people, especially younger people, are speaking out and acting up when it comes to climate? Do the rights of special interests outweigh the common good? I don't think so. They shouldn't. According to the WHO, 7 million people die every year prematurely because of polluted air. I've taken a few trips to China, and there are days where it's hard to breathe. But even now in California, a couple of years ago, they had the wildfires, and they estimated that breathing the wildfire smoke was the equivalent of smoking 2 packs a day. And people actually moved out of the Bay Area after that because, they had kids with asthma. They just couldn't live like that. So this notion of climate refugees is not some abstract 30-year from now thing. People are already moving away from California and the wildfires and the water shortages in the Southwest. And increasingly, you're going to see the Gulf Coast. People just not willing to take those risks with their homes, with their lives when it comes to these supersized hurricanes. Every day, 2 million tons of sewage pumped into our oceans worldwide, 9 million tons of plastic pollution. Mitch Hescox, in the book Caring for Creation, said that 1 in 3 kids today suffer from either severe asthma, allergies, ADHD, or autism. I think we can all agree fewer chemicals in our environment, probably a good thing. So we have challenges. Everything we do will be storm-proof, flood-resistant, drought-tolerant. Every threat is an opportunity. How do we manage this new climate? What are the best practices for farming, for battling invasive species, the risk to our north woods, the risk to our fish, our aquatic species? This statistic never fails to blow me away. Renewable energy creating jobs 12 times faster than the rest of the economy. And I've had a couple of electric cars, and I'm just going to briefly mention my experience. There is, in fact, a return on investment. I have a Tesla Model 3, and what I've found is that the operating costs are significantly less, especially when gas was crazy up above $4. I calculate I'm spending anywhere from a quarter to a third per mile than what I was spending with my gas-powered vehicles. It has a range of 300 miles, and there is a payback. There is a return on investment. You pay more now. They're still expensive relative to fossil fuel cars, but there are now more affordable options. I saw Chevy, the Equinox, priced at $30,000, I think a range of 300 miles. You're going to have more options, greater range as the battery technology continues to improve. And people have to run the numbers for themselves, right? Can an EV work for me? I'm not going to make a blanket statement. For many people, they can work. If you drive, 1,000 miles every week and you don't have access to these charging stations, it can be more problematic, at least today. My wife just picked up a Model Y, so we have 2 electric vehicles, and these are our daily drivers. And 95% of the miles we put on are in these EVs. And once you've charged a vehicle in your garage, you wake up in the morning and you've got 250, 300 miles of range, and you don't have to, spend time at the local gas station. It changes your life. What you do have to do is think, okay, where am I going tomorrow? You know what? I want to make sure I have enough. You want to always have some reserve, right? You don't want to limp back to your garage with 2 miles of range left. The whole range anxiety thing is real, and that's why we just purchased a Volvo, gas-powered Volvo, and that's our road trip car, and we love it. So my sense is over time, when there are as many chargers as there are gas pumps. And when you can recharge that battery in 10, 15 minutes, now it's closer to 20, depending on how much range you want. But we're moving in that direction as the battery technology continues to improve. Wayne Gretzky said, "Skate to where the puck is going." That quote has stuck with me over time. We are really, I'd say, in maybe the second inning of a clean energy revolution that is inevitable. And people are apprehensive. They say, "This is how I've always done things. You're asking me to change my habits." I think many people, not all, resist change. But that's the only thing I can predict with any accuracy. Things are going to change. It's part of life. We've always had change. And people resist that. We all kind of get into our comfortable ruts. This is how I do things. Now you're asking me to change. But if you can save money while making those changes and doing something good for the environment, for God's creation, for the only home we have, why wouldn't you at least contemplate easing into those changes? Solar shingles is a thing, solar paint, solar windows. Why on earth wouldn't we want to harvest the free energy that we get to enjoy every day with wind and solar? And I saw this headline the other day, Caterpillar, construction equipment. They're electrifying construction equipment. Farm equipment will be increasingly electrified. Why wouldn't you use solar panels or wind power to charge up your equipment? If you can save money in the long run, if you can prove to me there's a return on investment, most people would at least look at the numbers. Maybe it's not there today, but I think those numbers are going to get better as the years goes on. I'm a capitalist. I'm not a socialist. Capitalism ain't perfect. It's a long way from perfect, but it's still the best way to guarantee innovation and new services and give people the jobs that the standard of living that they want, and give people the ability to rise up based on how hard they work, how much they want it. I think let the markets work. And even nuclear, I've kind of come 360 on nuclear. We lived 20 miles downwind of TMI when that partially melted down, and I was there. We were ready to evacuate. My dad had a job lined up in California. And so I was anti-nuke for a while in reaction to that. But nuclear power does not create carbon dioxide. There are no emissions. And you look at the numbers, if we can operate the nukes we have now safely, great. And there are all kinds of new investments coming with smaller, much more affordable, safer nuclear concepts that don't create the plutonium that can be turned into nuclear weapons. So I think nuclear probably needs to be part of the equation. I'm optimistic, I'm hopeful for two main reasons. The arc of technology. Prices are falling faster for clean energy than they are for fossil fuel. And I'm not going to demonize fossil fuel. Coal, oil, gas got us to where we are today. But it's not sustainable. We can't keep burning the oil and gas and coal and then scratch our heads and become indignant every time there's a mega flood or a withering drought. There is a link. We need to gradually, methodically, slowly wean ourselves off fossil fuels while we ramp up new, affordable EVs, new, cleaner alternatives that don't have as many downsides as fossil fuels. I still pump gas, I take advantage of it, but I'm trying to look at my own carbon footprint and find ways to do things better. The other reason why I'm optimistic, our kids tend to be less cynical, less skeptical. They see what's going on. It's their world. They are going to be inheriting this. And they just want to have the same stuff we had without constant weather disruptions and running out of water and whole counties catching on fire. Every threat is an opportunity. I really do believe that. And I'm pro-polar bear, but I'm sorry, this really isn't about polar bears. This is about our kids and their kids, everybody who comes next. Jordan, my grandson, has mastered the Roku remote control at the age of 2. One constant, I don't care what your politics is. And by the way, neither does the atmosphere. We love our kids. We love our kids. And by sitting on your hands and ignoring or denying the science, you're hurting your kids. Because they're the ones who will deal with the consequences of your inaction. Not everybody has to be a climate activist, but I would just implore people, keep an open mind. Everybody has their own aha moment where they've seen enough, where they go, all right, yeah, something's going on. We should probably pay attention and not be in perpetual denial. Billy Graham, it's not right for us to destroy the world God has given us. He has created everything. To drive to extinction something He has created is wrong. He has a purpose for everything. We Christians have a responsibility to take the lead in caring for the earth. He went on to say, my home is in heaven. I'm just traveling through this world. We lease everything. And we have an obligation. Matthew 25:45. Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. 150, it may be closer to 200 million people live within 3 feet of sea level around the world. For them, climate change, rising seas, and the seas are rising. You can take a ruler and measure the water coming up. It's not a theory, it's happening. And South Florida may see 2-3 feet of sea level rise over the next 70, 80 years. You're going to be hearing more of that, and people are going to be retreating from the oceans. Dr. Martin Luther King, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. If you see something, say something. And don't be afraid to speak up. I know it can be it's easier to talk about the weather and complain about the weather than launching into a screed about climate change, but connect the dots. I don't pretend to know the mind of God. I'm reading the New Testament, and based on the Gospels, Jesus' words, His parables, sometimes I wonder out loud, what would Jesus say if He came back today and looked at the world and specifically how we are impacting our climate and how that climate is impacting the weather? He might say, as He often did, He answered a question with a question. He wanted us to come up with the answers. Did you protect my Father's home? Did you defend His children? How are we going to answer those questions? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
So we have an opportunity here to take some questions from the audience. There's some ushers walking around with microphones. If there was anything that struck you, either before you came or maybe after listening to Paul, we'd love to hear your questions. There's a good chance someone else is thinking them. I was just really, okay, Sally Houskin, hi.
Is this a unidirectional Okay. Uh, the Environmental Defense Fund, in its latest newsletter, had a page about eliminating cemeteries. And I just sent a copy of it to the University of North Dakota Medical School, because what they're recommending is that instead of regular burial or cremation, they use straw and wood and so forth, so that the body
Decomposes
that's
back
correct. That's
dust to
correct.
dust, yeah.
Are you familiar with that?
A little bit. I know it. It's above my pay grade, but are you directing that at me because that day is coming soon? I need to make some decisions.
That was one of the
Do you have a brochure? I'm interested. It makes sense to me. When I'm gone, I'm not going to care. It's more for the people who follow you, right? God will. I'm going to be in heaven. What happens to my body at that point, I don't care. And I want to do what's. It seems like insanity to have these monstrous coffins that are made of steel and concrete that will be there, for thousands of years. I mean, why are we doing that?
plus the granite slab that is above ground.
Yeah. No, it makes sense to me. And there's always a better, smarter way.
The
And
Environmental Defense Fund.
EDF.
Name of the
I'll have to look into that. So it's like green burial or green. Does it have a name? That kind of where you're using wood and straw?
I read the whole article, but I can't remember if it had a name.
Composting. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Interesting. Okay, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, Sally. Yes, young man.
What do you think?
20 years? How old are you?
I'm about 7.
About 7. Are you rounding up? Because now I round down.
Yeah, I'm rounding up to 8.
So you're 7. What is your name? I think, is this microphone on or am?
I'm 7 years old and my name is Absalom. I have a nickname too, though.
What's your nickname?
Abe.
Abe? That's a great nickname. Honest Abe?
No, that one was Abraham Lincoln. What do you think Minnesota will be like in 20
years. Well, Abe, if I can call you Abe, these changes that we're seeing are slow motion, right? Until it's in your face with a more extreme flood or more extreme drought or more icing. I want to believe that the changes won't be as dramatic in Minnesota as they will be for much of the southern U.S., but I think we won't be able to catch certain kinds of fish in our lakes that we can catch today because the summer lake water temperatures will be too warm. I think the prairies may continue to sort of retreat to the north. We're going to be seeing more prairie land. I think agriculture, Minnesota is actually well positioned compared to much of the Corn Belt, and I understand Detroit Lakes now is in the Corn Belt. How did I not know that you're growing corn here? I think the changes will be a little more subtle, and most of the data that I see that climate change will be, how can I phrase this best? The changes are going to be much more drastic in the western U.S. and the southern U.S. The best places to live will be places like Minnesota, Michigan, Maine, Washington State, Pacific Northwest. So not to say we're not going to have issues here. I think we'll see more ice and rain in the winter. It'll still snow here. We'll still have cold fronts. If Canada runs out of cold fronts, the planet has much bigger problems. I don't see that happening anytime soon. I think the winters will continue to trend a little bit warmer. The summers will be a little bit hotter and more humid. More flooding concerns when it does rain. So it's an opportunity for companies to figure out better ways to weatherize our homes and our farms and our businesses. So when it does rain hard, we're okay. New ways to develop, new developments, stronger building codes so that we don't have to keep going back to our insurance companies. But to your point, the changes in Minnesota, especially looking out 20 years, I don't think will be as dramatic as they will be. You want to keep things the way they are?
There's a few people who don't.
Yeah. You speak the truth. And we're not doing it for ourselves. We're doing it for Abe and his friends and your kids. Thank you, Abe. Yes.
Paul, can you give us encouragement in how we can advocate both for electric vehicles, that energy source, solar power, and ways we can consider adding that in on the small scale in our homes, et cetera?
Sure.
Any ways we can become actively advocates for?
I think, no, that's a great question. I think I have not met a person on the planet who doesn't like to save money where appropriate, right? We all, if you can do the same things, get around, heat your home, and save money in the process, why on earth wouldn't you consider that? So that's often the foot in the door. Hey, have you run the numbers? Things have changed. The technology has evolved. The solar panels are cheaper. The batteries are more powerful. And that trend is going to continue. Have you looked at the numbers for your situation lately? You should really sit down and run the numbers. It may not work for everybody, but it works for a lot of people. You can have everything you want, pay less. So to me, it doesn't matter what your politics is. Republicans, Democrats, Independents like to save money. So run the numbers. And that can be the foot in the door. And once they kind of go down the rabbit hole, my wife now is in a cult. And that cult is called Tesla. And she shows me these YouTube videos, and my God. And she thought I was crazy. Back in 2013, I bought a used Model S, and I traded in a gas-powered vehicle. And she thought I had lost my mind. She watched me over the span of 9 years. And at first it was like, oh, we're going to use electricity, our rates are going to go up, our utility, we're going to get slaughtered. I'm going to let you know if I get a bill, if our bill for electricity goes way up, you're going to pay that. She didn't notice any meaningful blip when I started charging up my car. What she did notice is while she was schlepping down at the BP putting gas in her car, I would wake up, walk out into the garage, unplug the charger, get in my vehicle, and go 300 miles. And she became increasingly jealous of how I was getting around town. So after I traded in the S for a Model 3, and I put snow tires on, I've had pickups, I've had SUVs. This thing is amazing on snow. It's good with the all season, but you put the snow tires on, it cuts through almost anything. That's been my experience. She just ordered a Model Y, and she gets it now. And all of us take our time in terms of having, as I mentioned, that aha moment. And you can change your mind just based on the numbers. So I would encourage people, run the numbers for you. And that's true with solar and solar panels. And now with wind, there are many of the utilities offering incentives. And so I ask people, just keep an open mind. Even if you don't believe the scientists, you don't believe the meteorologists, you don't believe your minister, do yourself and your kids and their kids a favor. Just keep an open mind. And it may work for you sooner than you think. So I hope that helped. Thank you for a great question.
All right. Well, Paul will be in the back if you would like to meet him or have him sign one of his books. We would encourage you to stop by and say hello. Please join me in thanking Paul for speaking with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Polly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, we're not done with Indian summer yet. I think we're going to see 60 degrees here the end of next week and next weekend. So, we get these crazy swings. And the winter, my official winter forecast, you want to hear it? Colder with some snow. Take it to the bank. Take it to the bank. I stand by that. A 6-month weather forecast is not science. It's a horoscope. We don't know. We don't know. There are certain things that are unknowable. And so I hope we get a lot of snow. I can live without 30 below, but I'm pro snow. And I say bring it on. But there's really no way to tell. We have a La Nina cooling phase in the Pacific that tends to correlate a slightly greater chance of colder and snowier for most of Minnesota. So if push came to shove, I'd say a little colder and a little snowier. I just hope we have a better April than we did this year. That was pretty tough. But don't panic, all right? The winters are trending warmer. We don't see the volume of Arctic air that we did. How many of you were here in the 70s? I mean, that was some serious cold air. The odds of that happening, we get a polar punch every now and then, but the week after week after week of 20 below, we're not seeing that. So we're still going to get cold pops. It's going to go below zero. But it doesn't stay below zero as long as it did for your parents and their parents. The winters aren't as ferocious as they were as recently as the 70s and early 80s. That's a trend. It's still going to snow. It's going to get cold. But the really nasty stuff, we're seeing less of that. So I think that's good news. Anyway, I'm out of time. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your day.
Okay, before you leave, we have some giveaways. So please stay seated a moment here while we bring up the names of people who are going to take some trees home with them today. Okay. So the first one is ticket number 849-229. 849-229. Anybody have that one? No? Okay, let's try another one. Thanks, Bridget. Okay. 849-285. 285. 285 for an apple tree. All right. Thank you. Great. Wonderful. We have a couple trees up here, and you can choose which one you want. They're both apple trees. 849-272. 849-272. Did I see somebody go, yeah? All right. All right. So the two of you, please come. And then we have some grab bags here as well, some things that we'd like you to take if you would like. 849-263. 849-263. Some bags and gear from utility companies that were here with us today. All right, 849-235. 235 for some grab bag stuff. Come on, all right. And then a couple of, two more backpack bags. 849-282. 282. Is there somebody that has 282? All right. Yes? All right. Yay. Come on up. Way to go. And then the last one is 849-287. 849-287. All right. Let's give this last. Sandy? All right. Sandy. Good job. Thank you. All right. And again, Paul will be in the back for a few moments here if you'd like to say hello before he leaves. And just a reminder to drop your surveys in the back table as you leave. The Eco Echoes will take us out with their closing song, Plant Another Tree.
So you notice the band all got their plaid out because the song was inspired by a children's book, Paul Bunyan's Sweetheart. Maybe if you've been to Hackensack, you've seen the statue of Lucette. And Mary Beth Lorbiecki wrote the book, and that's what the song is based on. And she went out with old Paul on one condition. One, two, three. We got a lumberjack. The name of Paul Bunyan gave his axe a big whack, and then he felled another tree. Felled another tree. He felled another tree. He felled another tree. He's chopping down the forest, all for the lumber company. But then he met up with a woman from Hackensack. The name of Lucette, she wouldn't take no flack, cause she was standing up for trees. Standing up for trees. She be standing up for trees. Standing up for trees. Trooping up the forest. Standing up for trees. So he gathered up his courage and he asked her on a date. He looked him up and down and said, now just you wait. You gotta show me how you love. Show me how you love me. Show me how you love. Show me how you love me. Key to my heart, Paul. Show me how you love. So he cleared every trick that he knew in the book, but he couldn't get Lucette to give him just one look. He had to twiddle the tea. Plant another tree. He had to plant another tree. Plant another tree. He didn't even know it. Paul was in such misery. So Lucette sat him down and said, now look here, Jack. The good Lord can give it, and he can take it all back. You gotta stand up for the trees. Stand up for the trees. You better stand up for the trees. Stand up for the trees. Key to my heart, Paul, hey, stand up for the trees. Said a lumberjack can build a cabin out of wood. He can make enough paper for the whole neighborhood, but now he plants another tree. Plant another tree. He always plants another tree. Plant another tree. He's a true man of the forest. Hey, he knows to plant another tree. I said a true man of the forest sure knows how to plant another tree. Amen.